I've been doing art all my life that I can remember. I drew a lot in elementary and maybe not quite so much in middle school. And I didn't really take any art classes. I've looked at some of my early art, from that time. I actually still have a few things from elementary, and I noticed the detail. When I graduated from high school and went to college, I kind of became reintroduced to drawing. I kind of got back into it, and I have a drawing from that time period that's 50 years old. This is it right here. And this is a drawing of, I was at a Christian school in the south of Texas, and this was a fountain there, and for some reason I became really intrigued with it and decided to do a drawing of it, and it's dated 1970. I got a degree in biology and later a degree in geology, and so we did a lot of drawing. In 1976, I graduated from university with my degree in biology, and then I took off to Europe. A big part of my travels in Europe were just taking in the scenery, the day-to-day scenery, meeting wonderful folks, but the architecture and the art museums were just spectacular. It's one thing to see it in a book, but quite another to actually just be right there in front of it. I talk a lot about Leonardo, and I study him, and I've done a number of copies of his work, and I've actually done my own Mona Lisa. Kind of fun. I met my wife at the University of Texas at Arlington, and we had just some kind of a kindred connection that just really fused. She's the colorist of the two of us, I would say. So I've learned a lot from her in that regard, and I'm still working on it. I became a teacher, a science teacher, and teaching first in Clover Park School District. And while I was there, I got involved with an after-school drawing class. Had a great bunch of kids, and we would go around the campus and find interesting places and sit down and draw. Well, we moved out here, actually into Vaughan in 93, and our daughter was born in 92, Catherine. From the time I started at Key Peninsula Middle School, I was teaching after-school drawing, and a little bit later got introduced to Two Waters Arts Alliance. They were doing all kinds of some really wonderful programs with the schools, artisan schools, and then the after-school art program at KPMS. I was inspired to take on teaching art, being the art teacher there at KPMS, along with continuing with my science teaching and aerospace and a lot of other classes. It's kind of fun. My daughter was one of my students, and loved that. I guess found this love that I have for portrait art, and did some of my earliest portraits back in '97, I guess, and then my first charcoal portrait was in 1999. And John Singer Sargent is the quintessential portrait artist. I'm also a big fan of Andrew Wyeth, and Andrew Wyeth is an amazing artist. Another artist who I've gotten an opportunity to meet is a guy named Richard Schmidt. And Richard Schmidt is just a fabulous portrait, figurative, landscape, still life artist, you name it, he does it. And he does it with such amazing ability. Since I've been retired, and I got an opportunity to teach a class over at Mustard Seed. Just loved that. And some of the folks who I got to know in the class, and my students, we've all been going out and doing plein air painting for the last, over a year now. In terms of media, things that I do. I paint in oil, in watercolor, but I do a lot of my portrait work in charcoal. When I discovered charcoal, I couldn't believe it, because it has so much range in values. Some of my earliest portraits were of Native Americans. I was very taken with the portraiture of Edward Curtis, late 1800s, early 1900s, and he compiled hundreds of photos of Native Americans. My wife and I took some opportunities to go to some powwows, and that was really, really cool. And from time to time would set up at powwows and would do portraits. This particular drawing traveled to Australia, and so it ended up in a show there. That was really cool. This particular drawing of my daughter Catherine I did in 2002. She's peering out of the white paper. I showed this drawing at a show in Gig Harbor, I think, and I recall the judge asked me whether it was finished or not. And so I took that to the Puyallup Fair in 2003, and it got Best of Show. And so it really, in many cases, depends on who is judging the show and so on. This is another print of a drawing of Catherine. This is called The Dreamer. This is 2011 Art Renewal Salon, and this was the 8th annual salon. And this, again, it's an international, it's a highly competitive, it's one of the most competitive shows really in the world in terms of representational art. So they were interested in purchasing the drawing, so it's in a museum in New Jersey. This is a drawing of my daughter, Catherine, and Caleb, my son-in-law. I do an initial pencil drawing over the entire portrait. I spend a lot of time getting very accurate drawing. So you can kind of see the sort of finish that I get with my charcoals. It gives a kind of a soft touch. And to get her hair like that, I use an eraser. I use a kneadable eraser like this, and I also use a chamois also. So the chamois is kind of cool because I can take out, if I want to remove some tone, then I can use the chamois to do that. Things like her jewelry here, I'll use a kneadable eraser, and I'll just come in and I'll just sort of lift out like so. So this is a drawing that was also in the Art Renewal Center show, and of Maddie, who's one of my former students, and great kid, really neat young lady. And she sat for me right over the table over in there. There's nothing finer than working from a live model. The eyes are so important in a portrait and says a lot, and you got to get them right. One of the things that I teach my students, and I work when I'm working with my students on portraits, is I refer to, especially if someone is looking right at you, this triangle, the importance of this triangle. So you got the eyes and the bottom of the nose, and when you're looking at someone, and you sort of take that whole shape in, it will help you with your drawing. Portrait of her and her son Liam, and so this is really a special drawing. And I also did another version of this in pastel. My granddaughter, that's a charcoal that I did recently. If I'm working on her eye here, I sort of take in the whole area here, that whole shape right there, and I compare it to what I'm doing here. And you can kind of see that kind of shape is largely the same. I'm looking at this line here, I mean, as it goes across there, because her face, you'll notice that there's a difference between the length of one eye versus the other, because her face is wrapped around. So this is close right here to the proportions that I'm seeing here. If I have the image right next to where I'm working, then it allows me to make the marks that I want to make, because much of what I'm doing now is essentially based on memory. So when I'm working with the medium, I'm going over it, back and forth over it, and I will almost draw it in layers. So I use my eraser, not just really for erasing, but what I call lifting out. If I want to get like that highlight in her eye right here, just take the tip of my kneadable eraser here and just sort of lift it out. And I'm looking at, again, that angle as such, and this distance across here is also really critical. Now there's a lot of things along here. The bridge of her nose is a plane. This is also a plane right here. So the cool thing about it, for me, is if I take the time to get the drawing right from the beginning, then I'm not fighting it. Okay, because the getting an accurate drawing is where there's a lot of work. But that kind of gives you the idea. One of the things about painting, when you got painting plein air, is the light, and of course working on the water, you get a lot of dealing with the tides, but obviously the movement of the light and shadows and so on. So ideally, what you want to try and do is you want to get your the center of attention, get that in with that light and those values, and what's called the edges, and kind of early on as best you can, and then you can kind of fill in. So all these colors here don't change appreciably, but the light striking the house here changes. And I'm doing a technique called scrumbling. But I really like the colors of the water here. These beautiful greens, just real subtle colors, and against these dark shapes. The lightest value, of course, is this area right here of that house, and much of that is when I was painting it in, I used I lifted some of the paint to get back to the white of the canvas, to make it that stark white, and then I used titanium white on top of it, kind of an impasto. So this is kind of starting as a plein air and then sort of finishing up here in the backyard kind of thing, and so it's not entirely, not pure plein air. I mean, I thoroughly have been enjoying painting plein air with Ray and Leela and Jerry and all the others. Delia has been just a lot of fun, and so we're all kind of learning together.